everybody, and welcome to The Brand Called You. Listen, I want to start with one of my favorite quotes from Malcolm X, the civil rights leader in the 60s. He said, "When I replaced with we, even the illness becomes wellness." I absolutely love that quote because today's talk is all about moving from the I to the we. Now, I don't want to sound too abstract. What we're really talking about is exploring a new burgeoning approach to living called co-housing. Co-housing is not exactly new. It was started in Denmark in the 1960s by some single parents, but it has taken off, particularly in America, which is quite interesting to me as an American, because our country in general has a tradition of rampant individualism. So the idea of moving into an intentional community, a co-housing community, which is a group of private homes that are clustered around shared space, is really very exciting. And I've invited two residents with very different stories who have moved up to Northampton, Massachusetts, an area about 2 hours from Boston in Western Mass. They moved to two different co-housing communities, and we're going to be talking to them about what inspired them to reach for this new kind of community. But before I introduce them, I want to introduce a special co-host who I've invited to share the interviewing with me today. After all, co-housing deserves a co-host. Frits Bussemaker lives in Amsterdam in the Netherlands, and he is a community builder extraordinaire. For 35 years, he's traveled all over the world, helping governments, educational institutions, and private business learn how to harness the power of community to achieve many, many wonderful things. So I'm going to start by welcoming you, Frits.
Lisa, thank you so much. Honored to be your co-host today. And I'm very interested to see what Richard and Meg have to say about their real life experience actually living in a community. So
well, let me introduce our guest today. So Meg Bogdan is a solo parent of two children, Athena, who's 17, and Jude, who's 9. And Meg was a pretty high-powered, still is, but she was working the classic lawyer job in New York as an entertainment lawyer, working crazy hours and raising her kids in a New York City kind of life. I loved when she told me that in order to go out and play, she'd have to do what all New York City parents did, right? Which is go down 7 flights of the elevator and before they can run out and play. And due to a number of changes in her job and maybe her spirit as well, she reached for co-housing and moved to Village Hill Co-housing, which was a new community. And we're going to talk to you in a second, Meg. I want to introduce my other guest today, which is Richard Getler. Richard's story was quite different. Richard is also a father, and but his kids are grown. Kirsten is 57, Erica is 54, and Daniel is 37. And he, like Meg, was working in New York City, an executive at L'Oreal, and he retired in 2012. And I think was very happy in his retirement, playing tennis and taking pictures as his newfound passion. But his wife was pretty miserable. As she described it to me, they were in Tarrytown, New York, in a suburb, and they would just pull their cars into their driveway and close the garage door along with everyone else, and no one talked to anyone. And she felt very isolated. So she, at her urging, Richard moved to Rocky Hill Co-housing. And I guess that's where I want to begin, Richard. Did you know anything about this world of co-housing when you made the leap? How did it happen?
Yes, we had actually been involved with co-housing for a number of years. My wife in particular was interested in co-housing, and we were involved with a group that was trying to build a new co-housing community near New Haven for about 10 years. And it just took forever for them to get it together. It was the first one in Connecticut, and there were a lot of regulations they had to get passed. So my wife, Janet, got very impatient and said, and she was always looking for homes available in established co-housing communities. So we knew about the ones in Northampton. We had actually visited up here, and all of a sudden a home became available. And she said, let's just move into an existing co-housing community. We've spent enough time trying to build a community. It's not happening. It's happening too slowly. And that's how we ended up here.
And to your surprise, you've loved it, or has it been a challenge?
I absolutely love it. I think just as much as my wife does, maybe more so. You know, I was very content with my life in New York. As you said, I was playing tennis every day, doing photography every day. I had a wonderful retirement, a lot of friends and family. So I was a little bit reluctant to move away and move up to Massachusetts. But this community is just, I mean, what's wonderful about it is the people. I just feel like it's great to live in a community where everyone cares about everyone else. I mean, what a concept. You know, you can move into a condominium or a co-op and, you know, you might find a few friends. If you're really social, you'll meet a lot of friends. But here, there's really the intention of, you know, nurturing each other, caring for each other. You know, it's just a wonderful way to live.
Now, you did have some background with communal living in your California past, right? You lived in some communes and so forth.
Yes, we did, you know, we're looking at all kinds of spiritual communities and had lived with groups of people before, but nothing like co-housing. This is new to us.
And can you just describe how it would be different from living in an apartment building with a co-op board, for example?
Well, we do have a board, a board of trustees, but all major decisions are made by the community as a whole in meetings that we hold once a month, our community meetings, and we make big decisions by what's called consensus, where everyone basically needs to either agree or not, at least not block a major decision. In the 6.5 years I've been here, it's worked extremely well. I've been very pleased with how consensus works. I know there are other ways that co-housing communities, you know, govern themselves, but I find this is working really nicely.
Well, actually, a new form of governance is called sociocracy. And I believe, Meg, you live in Village Hill, which practices sociocracy. Maybe you could just explain what that governance is about.
Well, I'm not on the governance circle, so I'm not an expert in sociocracy, but I was involved with Village Hill co-housing before any buildings were built or before there was even. So I know from the beginning that we decided against consensus because of some nightmare stories from some other people who are in co-housing. That if you end up with someone in your community, which doesn't seem like you have this at Rocky Hill, who is less community minded or more stubborn or some other kind of work, one person can hold up a lot of stuff. And that was an issue for us when we were starting out, because we didn't know each other very well, and we didn't know enough about, we couldn't trust that there wasn't someone there who'd be like, I'm not going to vote on anything unless I'm allowed to have a pool in my backyard, you know, something like that. So not me, but a number of people did a lot of research on the different governing structures and chose sociocracy, which is, this is not an expert description of sociocracy, but my understanding. Instead of a hierarchical sense, which consensus isn't either, but there are different circles which are given the power to make decisions, and then you have subcircles, and so and then there's a central circle. And so the way it works is that you empower the different circles to be experts in, there's grounds, there is the common house, there is I'm on the finance legal one since I'm a lawyer, and then we each kind of have our responsibilities, and when we think we're making a decision that impacts everyone, we bring it to the full circle and we talk about it. Everyone gets a chance. We do rounds, and if you have an objection to it, you state your objection, and we basically process it until, and the kind of the threshold issue is it good enough for now? Not, are you 100% on board, or is this the way you would have done it yourself? Basically, is it good enough for now and safe enough to try? So that, and I love that approach because I'm a more sort of rigid thinker, and coming from New York, it's like, if you don't push, if you don't get in line and make sure you're there, then nothing's going to happen. You got to do it right. And it's more like, can I handle this for right now? And so it's kind of loosened up my idea of like what I need to get invested in. Because, you know, like, I don't really care what color the common house is. So I'm not going to get invested in it, and I'm not going to vote. I'm going to say, whatever you decide is great. Mm-hmm. And then the things I am invested in, I want to listen to other people's opinions and either be convinced or convince.
Hmm.
Okay. Hey guys, I'm going to throw something in. Don't be offended, but this. So what's the difference between this and an HOA? Because it sounds like an HOA on steroids. And for those people not living in a state, an HOA is a homeowners association.
What do you mean? How is it different?
Is it the same? Is it compatible?
Well, an HOA is a homeowners association.
Yeah.
So Village Hill, in fact, we were Village Hill co-housing, and we live in a bigger community called Village Hill.
Okay.
And there is an HOA there that we're a member to, and we pay fees to, and they make decisions about what trees need to be cut down, you know, snow plowing for the whole community. But we're a subset. And I don't know how technically you want me to be, but a trust that we all own a percentage of owns all of our co-housing property and the common house and all the common space. And we each just own our own little unit. So when I'm planting flowers in my front lawn, I'm planting flowers on community space. So an HOA typically is more invested in the finance, you know, because like when I lived in an apartment building in New York City, what they're worried about is more the financial well-being of the building or the structure. We're, as a co-housing, HOA is more of a legal manipulative way, but we're more interested in the health of the emotional life of the community and the spiritual stuff. So it's more like it's not an HOA on steroids. It's an HOA with the business stuff pushed at the bottom and the people
Good.
stuff pushed
Okay.
at the top.
Just to make sure, just wanted to get that off the table. If people make that assumption, if they hear this introduction, because indeed, if you go to the website, it's actually quite amazed how much you talk about a community sense of actually doing things together, like having meals together, even in the common house. And that also, for me, then raises the question. When somebody decides to live there, because normally if you buy a house somewhere, if you want to live somewhere, you predominantly look at the house you're going to live in, and maybe the area and where are the shops and are the schools in the neighborhood. To what extent would you, in this particular case, if you go to a co-housing, you also want to look at who are the other people living there, and do they have a say in who's going to be their new neighbor?
We can start that maybe Richard or Meg, you can chime in. I think you indeed do have a say, in fact, right, Richard?
Sure. Yeah. You know, in the past, we didn't have a waiting list at Rocky Hill. So the way it works is if a house becomes available for sale, it's available first to other members of the community who might want to buy it, and then to the community as a whole, and lastly on the open market. But we now have a waiting list because demand has increased tremendously over the last few years for co-housing in our area. So, you know, now there's a sequence of people who have expressed interest, gone through the various steps to get on the waiting list. And so it's kind of a self-selecting process now. To go back to your earlier question about, you know, is this an HOA on steroids, though? I just wanted to say there are a few real differences. You know, we are technically, legally a condominium association, just like many other HOAs. But the differences are the design of the community. The parking is on the outside. We have a common house where we can have meals together. The governance is different, where we, you know, have consensus decision making, and we also do a lot of work together. So it keeps our HOA fees very low. In a traditional condominium, you hire out pretty much all the work. We have 4 work days a year where we all rake leaves together. We have our own snowplow committee who plows the snow for us. So those are the things that really distinguish us, I think, from a traditional HOA.
Great.
Okay, so for me, same here at Village Hill, but we're both in Massachusetts, and Massachusetts has like rules and laws about what you have to do if you're a condominium. So we're officially a condominium too. And that was one of the things that was really frustrating when we were setting up, is that we're, like you say, legally we're a condominium. So there's all these rules that we have to follow as a condominium that don't make sense in the context of HOA. So the way they speak of the board, the HOA board, which you're required to have, and you're required to have a meeting once a year to go over the finances, and you have to have a secretary and a president or whatever. That's not the way we make decisions. And the way the law has it is that the board is allowed to make decisions. They're allowed to impose fees. They're allowed all these. And since I was a lawyer, I read all that stuff and was like, how are we going to integrate the way we think about co-housing into this very hierarchical way of the board gets elected, they tell us what we have to do, they decide what kind of trees we're allowed to have. And so we've had to kind of manipulate sociocracy decision-making into a way that fits into the official legal way that we're required to make decisions. And I think from talking to Rocky Hill and also the other co-housing, we realized that other co-housings didn't have that clash because they didn't have, starting from the beginning, all this worry about making sure that they're following the law, because their co-housing came first, and then and that's not how it worked with us, which was somewhat of a mistake. I guess my point is that the legal system still has not figured out a way to, or does not conceptualize people who want to live together, want to make decisions, care about their neighbor. So the rules are very much like, if your lawn is not mowed and your property values are going down, the HOA is allowed to impose a fine on you. Whereas for us, if you're not mowing your lawn, we're going to have a meeting and we're going to talk about whether it's better for the environment not to mow the lawn, and should we have no mow May. And yeah.
Okay.
I'm curious about some of the unexpected joys for both of you. Was there any kind of unexpected epiphanous moments where you really felt like community was supporting you in ways you didn't expect?
Do you want to answer, Richard? Because I have stuff.
I've really enjoyed all of the different groups that have formed around here. We have an aging gracefully group, for everyone in the community over 50 gets together once a month, and we talk about the issues of aging. I've never lived anywhere where that, was formalized and we could get together and talk about that. I joined a men's group for the first time. We get together once a month and, chat about our issues. And so there are all I did not realize that there would be all these additional structures that I could participate in that would help me connect with people. And then the other great joy is just walking around the community and running into people. Like, you have to leave enough time if you're heading down to the parking lot to meet with at least 3 people before you get there. So you can't do anything last minute because you're going to end up talking with people along the way. So that was kind of a surprise to me about how social and friendly it is.
How about you, Meg?
Well, for me, unlike you, Richard, I moved here. I hadn't been here for very long before COVID hit. And so like the whole world changed. I have 2 kids. And so the whole world changed for me. So it's hard for me to think about, it's not like my before and after co-housing. It was more like before and after co-housing and COVID, because it happened. First we moved here, and then like a month later, everything shut down. So, but like during COVID, and I was homeschool or whatever, doing the homeschooling thing that we do. So like Jude is my younger one, a good example would be like, so we decided we were going to do a science experiment and build a air balloon. So all I had to do was send an email saying, Jude and I are going to launch our experiment at 2:00. And then there's like 12 people out there who are wanting to look at our experiment, and it's exciting. So pretty much, and Jude had a birthday. So we made cupcakes and we put them outside, and many people came and sang. So if that hadn't been the case, especially since I had just moved here and I didn't have like a community of parents and kids, his birthday would have been like a few of us looking at each other saying, oh, I wish you could have had a party. But it's, so celebrations are really easy to drum up at the last minute. That's lovely. And and also just people text each other, or they use their different platforms and say, I'm going for a walk. Anyone interested? Or I can't figure out how to work this. Anyone know how to do it? And then someone's like, oh, I know how to do it. I'm coming over now. So it's like the the steroids thing you say, it's like, can I borrow a cup of sugar on steroids?
Okay, no, that's fine. And I was just wondering, you both made a conscious choice for reasons to start to live in a co-housing. I'm assuming you have family still outside living in, I'd say, regular neighborhoods. I was wondering, when you ever discuss co-housing, is that neutral, positive, envious, or no, that's not going to be for me? So how I would say, how does your outside world view this co-housing?
I would say most people I know feel like that's not for me. There are a few who say, "Oh, I want to come visit you. I want to see what it's like." But I think a lot of people think, "Oh no, it's going to be too confining, and I'm going to have to go along with a group, and I won't be able to have my individuality that I'm used to." So I find that a lot of people, are not jealous, not, envious or wanting to move here, but we do get a lot of visitors and people always enjoy coming here. One nice thing is that we have guest rooms in our common house.
Yeah, us too.
The idea being that when people come visit, you don't need a big house with, guest rooms in it. They can stay at the common house. So it allows everyone to have a slightly smaller home. So that's another advantage.
Okay.
Meg,
you.
yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, and same thing here is that like there's an exercise room and there's a guest room. So a lot of people downsized moving here, knowing, but the outside, it's very interesting. It depends. So I grew up in more of a community-minded family. Like my parents were very active in civil rights movement. So we were often having teach-ins and potlucks. And so we borrowed each other's cars, and kids went over to other people's houses when the parents had to travel for work. So I assumed that it would be my life. And it was when I got out of that group that I was like, oh, people don't openly share their home. Like we would have potluck Thanksgiving dinners, and my parents are professors, and just randoms, anyone who they met at the grocery store or whatever, who didn't have a place to go would come over. So it was more like coming home than to a community where people are like, of course you can take my sled, So, but I do note that I have siblings, and the ones like living in New York, I lived in Harlem, and it was very kids played together in the streets. The kids waited outside where their moms got their hair braided. There was we went to the laundromats together. So there's a lot of imposed or, natural communication contact. No one had a swing set in their backyard. So every weekend we hang out at the park. And so there was already a lot of community, but my siblings who are more, live more suburban with their house and their trampoline in the back, will say to me, I feel kind of lonely, like I'm missing something. And I was like, well, the longer your driveway is, the less likely the kids are going to come up there and visit. So for me, it's only been positive. Like, wow, it would be really great to be able to go outside and automatically have someone to talk about, or to talk about something that's interesting to you. And that's one thing that I like about this community, is that there's many people here who are just really interested in learning about pretty much anything. So there's people who care about permaculture, and I'm not even sure what that is yet, but I know it when I'm not, working with two kids. If I want to know pretty much anything, there's someone here. And like, there's a math person who is a math, who teaches teachers how to teach math. During the homeschooling, she would sit outside with my kid and do math stuff with him. And there's writers and people who know a lot about gardening. So that for me is what feels great, because like just yesterday I visited my aunt at a old age home, retirement community. And it felt sort of sad, because there were people who had been hired there to play guitar and do exercise classes. And I was like, if you're at co-housing, you just sit out front. And like my aunt who has dementia, all she really wanted to do was watch other people do stuff and listen to us talk. And if you sit out on your front porch at co-housing, which, as Richard said, that's part of the design, is that everyone has a front porch that faces a path. So if you want human contact, you sit out your front porch and there'll be something to talk about. Then as you age, as the people who were young there once age, they know the younger kids, they're watching them on their scooters back and forth. So it's like a really important inoculation against the loneliness issue that's happening, especially in the United States.
Okay.
And am I talking too long?
No, it's great.
No.
Great.
I like the enthusiasm because you're, I think, implicitly like a mindset, like this is how you want to live.
Right.
But something which actually Richard said, and it touches on what you said about, you could say, being in the front porch, and maybe the word "if" is somewhere in your answer is. I know myself. When I wait, I'm not a morning person. I'm going to be grumpy. Are you allowed to be grumpy in this environment where you have so much attention?
I'll tell you, there's two people I already know who you're not allowed to talk to before 10 a.m. They won't, like we know who, and we know who's up at night, and they know what to text each other. If they're like, can you sleep? You're absolutely allowed to be grumpy, and absolutely you're allowed to walk down the path and be like, I'm talking, or oh, I'm busy, or totally.
Okay. Yeah. Richard, same with you, your community?
Yeah, everyone's involved in different ways in the community. So some people are, fully engaged, and then, you see them all the time. Other people are, more private and quiet, and you really don't see that much of them. And that's fine. I like that our community is kind of loose. It's not, we don't have a lot of demands put on people. There are expectations, but not a lot of demands. So I really like that aspect of this community.
So what are moving forward, what are some of the things you struggle with that you're hoping to remedy?
Me or Richard?
Yeah, Meg and Richard.
Well, again, the way that it is in the United States is that people who have wealth and generational wealth and access to power, they have now become more and more isolated, whereas people who live more community oriented because they live in the city, or because they have to live near their parents because that's the only way to afford childcare, they have community living that I think now wealthy people in the United States are somewhat envious of. Mm-hmm. So co-housing in the United States is almost exclusively wealthy people who have generational wealth, people whose parents owned houses, and which means white people, because Black people were not allowed to own houses in the United States until relatively recently. So most of the co-housing is white, upper class, not exclusively, but so it's not diverse. And that was really difficult for me and my kids moving from Harlem, where we spoke all these different languages. Everyone talks to everyone. Some people do fancy vacations, and some people have never been on a plane. And that's just not what co-housing is. Co-housing is wealthier people who have access to power. So that's a struggle, is how to figure out how to have a community where you share resources, where some people were given resources or were gifted resources from their skin color or their family wealth, and some people struggle just to buy the house.
Yeah, we have very similar challenge here, which is affordable housing. We've been fortunate in that we had a large house with a single person living in it, and he's rented out his house to first a Congolese family and now to an El Salvadorian family. So it's been great that we've had some diversity in our community. But it's really a challenge because we'd like them to be able to own in this, one of the homes, and they're just getting more and more expensive. This whole area has gone up in price. Yeah.
Fritz can speak to this because the Netherlands has a very, very governmental and aggressive program on providing affordable housing and really integrating it among wealthy residents. Do I have correct?
Yeah, no, that's right. No, sometimes it's a controversial decision to make, that specifically within city centers where you have social housing next to huge, massive villas. Initially, it's not all over the Netherlands, but the minute people start to live there, they do realize, hey, look, this is actually good for everybody. You see that particularly in an area like North Amsterdam. That used to be a very what's the word, best word term, like a backwards neighborhood. But now you see the very first early adopters of a new environment, the yuppies coming in, renovating the houses broke down. And so it turns into a environment where you have a combination of social housing and people who realize, I want to increase the neighborhood I want to live in. So there's a lot of, I'd say, co-housing elements, as you two described it, but it's almost, I'd say, in the nature to a lot of people to see if we can organize that.
Well, one other challenge I think a lot of co-housing communities face is how to keep it intergenerational. You know, we've been a very intergenerational community we have a number of people over 80, and then we have families with young kids. What happens to a lot of communities is as they age, they don't attract young families. We've been relatively fortunate in that area, but it's generally difficult to achieve.
Oh, I didn't realize that, because it seems like a perfect place, because, you know, you have people who are empty nesters or retired who love to teach your kid how to swim. I mean, there's people here are teaching the kids to swim, had science projects. Someone has a workshop in their basement. The kids come over and do that. So I'm hoping, oh, maybe it's because it's so expensive, is that young families can't afford it. That might be the reason, but there's a lot of interest from families for VHC, for our co-housing, but maybe that's also because we're new.
To me, it's the ideal place for kids to grow up. You know, they don't have to worry about cars. They play together outside. You know, we have a playground right in front of our house, and the kids are out there playing all the time. It's just fantastic.
Yeah. I heard one young child who was raised in co-housing saying that he thought he had 3 grandparents because, you know, he didn't know which one was the actual grandparent.
Right.
Which I think is wonderful. Fritz, I can't believe the time has already gone by. Are there any last closing questions you might have?
Yeah, because this is the brand called you, and so also want to see if we can get some personal, you could say, insights in both of you. Is this for everybody or not? That's the question I'd have. Trying to set something up, what's the bumpy road to success? What kind of mistakes have we made? What are the things to watch out for? So the negative side. So, I mean, do you have any comments on those variety of questions? Any of you two?
Well, I think it is not for everybody, but it's for more people than people think it is. So I think a lot of people think this isn't for me, and they actually might really enjoy it because it's not what they, expect. But not everyone wants to, go to monthly meetings and, have work days together. And, they want a more isolated, traditional suburban lifestyle. So that's the main thing I would say about that question.
How about you, Meg?
I have a lot to say, but like I always do. But yeah, I would agree with Richard. It's if you want it to be quiet all the time and you're of that ilk, then no, because your neighbors aren't going to want to hear when you're having a joyous conversation outside. I'm trying to study, no, you have to be adaptable. And so it's for people who are willing to do, like I said earlier, good enough for now. Like if you don't like a decision, it's not like you can put up a fence and not see your neighbor's house. So you have to be willing to be compromised, just like they will compromise when they don't like whatever you're growing on your front lawn or that sort of thing. But also the way it worked with us, and this is again back to mixing like the business conception and the law conception with what we're trying to do, which is more community minded, is that when the developer who developed this beautiful space, they're a business and they were trying to sell the units. And the idea of how to sell the units is different from the idea that the community was coming up with. It was, and this, you asked this earlier, they didn't want us to decide if the person, they didn't want the community, the members to say, we don't like that person. It's obvious that they're going to hold up all the decisions. For them, their obligation is, if they have the money and if they're, legitimate buyers, they sell to them. So that was a conflict. And we did have, we had someone here who moved, who they were older and they were losing capabilities mentally and physically, and they were interested in moving here so other people would shovel their lawn and drive them around. And there are people who move in hoping that they are going to get all the benefits of other people who are generous community givers and don't have the whatever. So, and that was a conflict. But now that the developers are not the ones who are selling the units, it's the trust that's selling the units, I think that will be different. But again, you asked earlier if we get to select, and there is some selection, because self-selection, because we ask people to come to meetings and they hear, that we're going to talk over and over again about whether we should have no mow May or what the composting situation is. And if they're like, oh my God, can't bear it, they're not coming again. Right. So that's the self-selection, but we're not allowed to say to someone, in the United States, there are categories. You can't say you can't come because, you are this religion or this color or this age.
Yeah, because it sounds a little bit contradiction. On one hand, you want to be very inclusive. Everybody can be a member. And at the same time, it also has the threat of becoming an echo chamber, that everybody's going to have the same vision and worldview.
But that's the self-selecting part. There's plenty of gay people here. There's trans people here. There's people who are gender expansive. And if you're not supportive of that, if you're not comfortable with that, you're probably not going to want to move in, because no one's going to support you when you say, I don't acknowledge, I don't acknowledge gay marriage or something. You're just not going to feel welcome. So I think that part helps.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that since I opened with a quote, I want to close with one too. It's my anthropologist, Margaret Mead. She said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. So maybe this is indeed the antidote to global loneliness. Time will tell, but you guys are making a really good argument for it. And I can't thank you enough for taking the time to talk to us today and educating people all over the world as to what's happening. And thank you, Fritz, so much for your contribution.
My pleasure. I enjoyed our talk today. Learned a lot. Thank you.
And thank you for introducing co-housing to the world. We thank Denmark. We'll thank Denmark.
Thank you, Denmark. All the best, you guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.